Jar Jar is the godfather of mocap, and Andy Serkis is just suckling on the teat.
I just had a mental image of him suckling on the teat of Jar Jar.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name is Tyler Hunt, and I'm alongside my co-host, as always, my good friend, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, Pat?
It's going good, man. So last week, we kind of made a quick joke about how we were recording super late in the week, like the latest we've ever recorded. And I think this is like one of the earliest we've ever recorded. This week.
There's not many Thursday recordings in our library, but we are recording this on a Thursday night, actually.
Yeah, so we're usually we're watching the movie that we're going to be reviewing this week, but luckily it kind of worked out perfect because I'm getting my wisdom teeth taken out tomorrow, so that could be very interesting. So we didn't want to take the chance that I wasn't going to be ready by like Sunday afternoon when we have been recording recently, so... Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend of just me hanging around being a fucking baby eating ice cream. Like my wife literally said to me today, she was like, "You're going to be the biggest baby, aren't you?" And I was like, absolutely. I'm already starting to be a baby and it hasn't even happened yet.
I know, you're like carving out days of time. And I remember when I got my wisdom teeth taken out, I think either day of or the next day I was like back at work or back out doing stuff. And you're planning on being laid up for 3 or 4 days just eating ice cream.
Well, I mean, that's probably what I would have done anyways because I love ice cream. But no, it's just that I've heard that the longer you wait, the worse it is. And I'm a baby, so I waited until I was 30 to get them pulled out. And they have been ready to be pulled out for like 5 years now.
Yeah, I mean, does your mouth hurt now with them like in there?
It kind of comes and goes. I get headaches a lot, and I've heard that that's a symptom, but that also could just be in my head because I've heard it's a symptom and I know that they need to be pulled out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get really bad migraines a lot, and they've been happening more frequently and more intense recently. So I finally figured it was about time for me to get them taken out. And I have 3 weeks of vacation this year because I just started my 6th year with the company that I work for. So yeah, I just got another week of vacation. So I figured this would be a good time to use a couple of days and get them yanked out and be a baby for a few days. And I have been kind of rushing around this past week to make sure that I had everything recorded for the YouTube channel. Because, again, I didn't want to count on having Monday to record all of that stuff. So I have everything recorded for next week. Obviously, for those that watch my Saturday night streams that I've been doing for the next couple of weeks, this will actually come out after that. But you will notice that I did not do one, obviously, because I don't think that Baby Pat would be very interesting to watch play Call of Duty. But I also might be a little high too.
I disagree. I think that would be really great. And also, I would happen to think that you were probably a baby most of the time when you play Call of Duty. So
I am. I actually cry a lot, surprisingly a lot. It sucks. I'm bad at that game. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
Cool. So you ready to get this thing started?
Yeah, so if this is your first episode, we kind of just check in with each other. This first segment, we call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
I watched a movie last night. So a couple weeks ago, I talked about Wind River, and that was a movie that had shown at Sundance. And I'm going to talk about another movie I watched that had shown at Sundance this year, and it's called The Little Hours. So this movie it has a pretty straightforward concept. It's like, what if priests and nuns and people of the cloth were crude, sexual, and sexy? And given the cast and the fact that this is a period piece, I thought that there was real opportunity here for humor and a really funny movie. The cast stars Alison Brie, Aubrey Plaza, Dave Franco, John C. Reilly, Molly Shannon, Nick Offerman, Fred Armisen, among others. So obviously a pretty stellar cast from a comedic standpoint. I thought that there was no way at all that this movie could fail. Like I mentioned, it is a period piece. It takes place in the Middle Ages. The story is pretty straightforward. Dave Franco's character sleeps with his master's wife. The master is played by Nick Offerman. Once he's caught sleeping with her, he flees and meets the priest played by John C. Reilly, who takes him into the convent as the handyman. The priest, like I said, he welcomes him on one condition. He asks to act like he's deaf and mute as to not to distract the nuns. So the man played by Dave Franco, has to protect this cover while the nuns are also resisting the temptation that comes along with having a young, attractive guy at the convent. So there are definitely laughs in this movie, sporadically, but not enough to salvage it, in my opinion. I think that the period piece aspect works for it for the most part. Like the outfits and the hair are ridiculous, but they also have modern lingo, which other movies have done before, and that really stands out as being funny. Nick Offerman in particular looks completely outrageous in this movie, and it really adds to the humor with his character. However, in my opinion, you can't build a 90-minute movie off of that one particular punchline. There has to be substantial story and more clever jokes throughout it, but instead everything falls under that one setup, and it feels really stale after a while. Every plot point throughout the story is a weird setup to an average punchline, one right after another, and it just doesn't carry any weight from a storytelling standpoint. So at the end of the day, this film was a story about the pursuit of pleasure, but I'll be honest, like there wasn't really much pleasure to be had with it. It was a pretty boring watch, and I was really disappointed because it's something that's been on my radar since it was released in theaters earlier this summer.
Yeah, it sounds like a kind of a cool concept, but it kind of sounds like an SNL skit, like something that they could do real quick and get in and get out type of thing. Like you said, it kind of revolves around one punchline, and that's kind of what SNL does, because you only have like 30 seconds to set something up and a couple of minutes to act it out. So it sounds like it would have been better suited for that type of sketch comedy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that that's a perfect analogy for it. It would have definitely been a much better sketch than a full-length feature film. So what are you into, man?
So I feel like I'm kind of legally obligated to talk about anything Planet of the Apes when it gets released. So they actually just came out with, I think it was last week that this came out, a new Planet of the Apes video game called Planet of the Apes: The Last Frontier, which is kind of an interactive, story-driven game similar to the Telltale games. I know you've played the Batman one. Have you played the Guardians of the Galaxy one yet?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, either have I. I've heard good things about it, though. But basically, this Planet of the Apes game, like I said, is more story-driven like those games, and it focuses more on character choices and development than action. It was produced by the Imaginarium, which is Andy Serkis's, aka the Godfather of mocap, production company. You guys can't see Tyler, but he's shaking his head right now because
no,
I threw that
knows.
just in just for you.
Everybody knows that Jar Jar is the Godfather of mocap, and Andy Serkis is just suckling on the teat.
I just had a mental image of him suckling on the teat of Jar Jar. That was weird. That was a weird mental image. But basically, the story of this particular video game, it's set in the Planet of the Apes universe, the trilogy, Caesar's trilogy. It's set in between the events of Dawn and War. And it focuses on a new tribe of apes that fractured off from Caesar's group a while back and now are struggling to find food. In the apes' attempt to branch out, they come across a group of human survivors going through similar troubles. And honestly, this game is kind of just made for fans like myself that can't really get enough Planet of the Apes. This is definitely not for a casual gamer. It doesn't have this wide appeal to it. You really kind of have to love the world that these filmmakers have created in the trilogy to kind of appreciate this game. I'm currently working on a gameplay series of this game on the YouTube channel that is going to be released next week. Not even using my face cam for this particular series, just because it's really just all about the characters and the choices that you make. There's not hardly any action in here, so it's just basically would just be me sitting there while I kind of butt in every once in a while and make a stupid joke here and there. So that's pretty much what those videos are so far, which kind of sums up the whole YouTube channel, actually. But there's really not a ton of action. I mean, there's action in the sense that there's action in these movies, but it's not something that you're necessarily controlling. You're just watching. One thing that kind of got me at the beginning was just how, for kind of an indie game, because I mean, this is not a production company that's made a video game from what I understand, the graphics for the game kind of jumped out at me. They aren't perfect. There's a couple of frames here and there that are a little pixelated here and there, like they kind of dropped a couple of frames here and there, but for the most part, it looks really, really good, especially for an indie type of game. I think that's kind of the thing that impressed me the most is the graphics. The story is really impressive as well. It really fits the tone of the films, in the sense that it's kind of morally ambiguous. There's really no true good guys or no true bad guys in the films and in this particular video game. You kind of take what you can get, or you kind of interpret it, who the good guy and who the bad guy is, because nobody's perfect in this world, and I really appreciate that this film or this game kind of fits that tone of the films. So I'm definitely excited to see where the story goes from here. I actually am pretty close. I've gotten through the 3rd chapter, and I've heard that there's only 5 chapters in the game, and I've only played it for like an hour and a half. So it's only like a 3-hour game, maybe 2.5 if you're pretty quick about it. So it's not very long. I definitely think that if you're interested in this universe, definitely check it out. I did pay $20 for this game. I really, really don't think it's worth that. Even for a fan like me, I'm starting to kind of get like, I don't know if $20 was quite worth it. I would definitely wait to see if it goes on sale, or maybe, I bought it on the PlayStation Network. I don't think it's on Xbox yet, but if they have a sale on it, definitely check it out if you're interested. But if you want like a really action heavy game, like I said, this game has action, but it's nothing that you can really control. It's a lot like those Telltale games where you kind of just about making the choices, dialogue and character choices, and it's not really about the action.
Yeah, I'll pass. Thanks though, bro.
Yeah, I kind of figured you would have that reaction. I wasn't necessarily trying to convince you, cause I figured you would pass, but, I'm definitely interested in it, obviously, and I'm really excited to see how it ends. I guess there's 3 different endings to it, so I'll probably play it a couple of times to see a couple of the different endings.
Cool, man. You ready to move on to comic books?
Yeah, what'd you read this week?
This should not be a surprise. It was a weird week. There wasn't a lot that came out this week. I only had 2 books that I picked up. I think that Thanksgiving might have had something to do with that. They maybe shipped less books because of the holiday. But either way, I talked about a new comic called Batman Creature of the Night, Book 1. It's written by Kurt, and I'm going to fuck up his last name because it's weird, but we're going to say it's Buick, and the art is done by a guy named John Paul Leon. So, despite what you heard from the title, this is not a Batman story. This book takes place in kind of, I guess you could say, our timeline. Batman comics exist, and Batman as a character is fictional in this universe. This book really explores the ideology of Batman, and it makes the situation that Bruce Wayne has been put in the comics feel real and feel depressing. So the idea is that kids love the thought of being a superhero, with many flocking to the character of Batman. But the reality is that there's nothing with this fantasy, especially as it pertains to Batman, that is jubilant. The story in particular, it follows a kid named Bruce Wainwright, who obviously flocks to Batman, given his name, being very similar to Bruce Wayne. He even has an uncle named Alfred, who serves as the main narrator, while the character of Bruce also has some narration as well through some journal entries. Bruce's story begins to reflect the story of Batman throughout this first book, and the result is very depressing. Bruce's life is thrown into a whirlwind, with his life truly imitating the art that he loves. I don't want to get into a ton of plot specifics, but this book is definitely a celebration of the character of Batman, albeit with a pretty depressing framing device in it. I definitely did not feel uplifted when I finished reading this book like I do with some of the other comics I read. I will say that the art for this book is fantastic, but the wording leaves a lot to be desired. And that's, I think, the first time I've ever read a comic book where I'm going to point out the, there's a word for that in the comics, whenever the wording, what is that? Do you know?
No, I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean the the dialogue bubbles.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I know. I know that there's a phrase for it.
Yeah, and I apologize. It's like, oh, call yourself a comic book fan, you don't even know this particular phrase, but I'm just going to say it as the wording. So like the words on the page that you actually read, it's hard to read. The font for Alfred's narration in particular is like a type of cursive that you almost have to strain your eyes to find out what it's saying. So definitely not a good creative choice there, but overall it's a pretty cool concept for a comic. Apparently that the author Buick, he did this with Superman in 2004 and is now obviously tackling it with Batman 13 years later. And I plan on continuing with this book, but I will say that it, like I said a few times, it's definitely got some depressing elements to it, but it's original enough that it really piqued my interest, and I'll continue to read it as the rest of the books come out. I know it's a mini series. I just don't know how many issues it'll be.
Yeah, man, it definitely sounds interesting. I kind of like the idea of kind of exploring the concept of, we always fantasize as kids being superheroes, but we don't really give too much thought. The idea of what that would actually mean, especially in Batman's case, because losing his parents at a young age, I mean, that obviously, it messed with him and it would mess with anybody. So I think people fantasize about being Batman in the sense that you'd be rich and you would be this badass that get to fight bad guys all day, all night long. But, yeah, they don't really think of how he became Batman. And I always thought of being Spider-Man when I was a kid. I always fantasized about that, but I guess, I mean, he has his flaws as well. I mean, he lost Uncle Ben and essentially his father, and he struggles to make ends meet and so on and so forth. And that's what really kind of related, or at least I related with the character, not necessarily because I lost my uncle or I struggled to make ends meet, but he just seemed like a very vulnerable character. So I think as kids, you kind of fantasize and you just kind of have selective memory about the characters that you love.
Yeah, man, absolutely. You nailed it on the head with that. So, what did you read?
So I read another number one. I'm slowly trying to get caught up on everything that I read. I said that, I think, for like 3 months now, but it's still true. That's what happens when you read as much as we do and you take like 2 or 3 weeks going to the comic book shop. You get backed up real quick. So I actually found this new number one from IDK called Sword of Ages. It's a new miniseries from IDK, like I said, which is the publisher that does TMNT. They also do a lot of comic adaptations, of popular franchises, but they have a lot of their own original properties as well. And one of their more popular, unfortunately I haven't read it, is Lock and Key. And half of that creative team that does Lock and Key is actually behind this new miniseries. And normally with these comics, and I know Tyler did a really good job when he was describing his comic book, and I try to do it when we review anything, is kind of give it a good synopsis. But with this book, it's kind of hard to do that because it's kind of all over the place for a number one. They introduce a lot in this book, so I will just say that it is a fantasy sci-fi epic, kind of a mashup of those two genres. It reminded me a lot of like Mad Max Fury Road meets Reborn, that book that we talked about a while back. The artwork is fantastic. It really kind of jumps off the page. The story is really, really cool. I am a fantasy fanboy. I do really like sci-fi as well. So it definitely has some great elements of both of those genres. But I think that they tried too much in the first issue. They had too big of a scope for the first issue. And it was kind of hard to understand exactly what was going on. The book definitely has a lot of potential. Like I said, the artwork is amazing and they introduce a lot of cool concepts. There's a lot of like trippy things in this book. They're kind of like these Viking-esque warriors, but it's also this dystopian universe, and it's very strange. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I like all of it. Like there wasn't an aspect of it that I didn't like. It was just really, really hard to follow. So I think I will stick with it. I think it has a lot of potential, but I just kind of hope that they kind of narrow their focus a little bit in the further issues.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely sounds interesting. I don't know that I'm in a position to start another series because, like you, I am backed up on my comics by quite a bit. So definitely sounds interesting and definitely something that I'll keep at the back of my mind, but not something that I think that I'll go pick up right away.
Yeah, I'd heard good things, and plus it's a mini series, so I do get trapped in that occasionally. It's only 4 or 5 issues, so I'll pick them up, and then that's $20, and that's 30, 40 minutes of reading. So I don't know. I get trapped in that sometimes, but I'd heard some good things, and I like I said, I like it so far. It just kind of needs to narrow its focus a little bit.
Cool. Ready to move
All
on?
right. So what's nerd news this week?
All right. So just a few stories here. Obviously, you mentioned we're recording a bit earlier in the week than what we typically do. So, and if you're listening to this on Monday and something huge breaks over the weekend, that's the reason we're not talking about it. But I do have a couple stories. The first was an interesting article I read about that Lord of the Rings show that's going to be on Amazon. Apparently, HBO decided to pass on it. I know that it was kind of like a weird thing to pop up on Amazon's radars, and a lot of people asked why wouldn't this show be on HBO, and apparently they decided they didn't need it because they have Westeros. So why pay a lot of money for a different franchise whenever they have this franchise that's working perfectly fine for them now? So again, this show will be a prequel to The Fellowship of the Ring, and I don't know that it will take place before The Hobbit or not, but it won't be a retelling of The Hobbit by any means. It'll just be some stories in Middle Earth from what I understand and from what I've seen. So personally, like, I'm not very interested in it. I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings guy, but I know that you have a softer spot for that universe. So is this something you'll be watching?
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I have Amazon Prime, so I mean, and it's a franchise that I love. So it's not too much of a stretch to give it at least a season. It's surprising that HBO wouldn't take a swing on it, just because, I mean, they have Game of Thrones. I know they're going to work on some spin-offs, and we'll see how that works out, but it just seems like they would want something else to kind of take the mantle once Game of Thrones is gone. But, I mean, it makes sense not to double down, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I guess it's probably pretty damn expensive to pick this show up, so I'm guessing why they passed. So
yeah, it was probably cheaper to get the Game of Thrones rights than it would be to get the Lord of the Rings rights at this point. Well, maybe not at this point, but when they actually got them.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's see. So obviously there was one big story this week, and I'll hold that off for last. But this is kind of just like a filler story because I thought it was pretty interesting, and that it showed the viewing habits of the average person pretty well. So they released the top 15 movies that have ever been rented on Redbox. So, like, all time, since I guess Redbox has been in existence. So I was going to run down
Redbox
this list.
is still in existence?
Oh, yeah, man. You can find one at every drugstore or supermarket or whatever. So I wanted to run through the top 15 all-time rented from Redbox just to show you the average moviegoer's viewing habits. So I'll go through it pretty quick because obviously 15 movies is quite a bit. But it'll give you a pretty good idea. So number 15 is White House Down. Number 14 is Divergent. Number 13 is World War Z. Number 12 is The Hunger Games Catching Fire. Number 11 is Captain Phillips. Number 10 is The Wolf of Wall Street. Number 9 is Just Go With It. Number 8 is another Adam Sandler movie, which is Grown Ups. Number 7 is Flight. Number 6 is The Heat. Number 5 is We're the Millers. Number 4 is The Avengers. Number 3 is Identity Thief. Number 2, 21 Jump Street. And the all-time most rented movie on Redbox is The Hunger Games.
So I understand why I no longer believe that Redbox is a thing, because apparently the only people that still rent from Redbox are douchebags. Because you named maybe 3-4 good movies in there.
Yeah, I mean, there are some movies in there that I like. Like, I enjoy the 2 Hunger Game movies that are in there, and of course the Avengers and The Wolf of Wall Street. But any list that has 2 Adam Sandler movies on it is not a good list.
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought that was pretty hilarious. And I hate to say this, and please don't take offense to this if you rent from Redbox, but let's be honest, like the people that rent from Redbox, that means that they most likely don't have the means to rent it at home, which means that they're probably, how do I say this without being offensive?
Stupid.
Well, white trash. I don't know. Like,
let's be honest. Let's be real right now. If you're still renting from Redbox, you're not listening to us on the podcast because you probably don't know what a podcast is.
That's a fair point. So thanks for making me feel a little better about that. All right.
I had literally no problem making fun of anybody that still rents from Redbox. Literally no problem whatsoever.
All right. So last news story, and probably the most obvious, is that yesterday we got the first trailer for Avengers Infinity War. And I'm assuming you watched it because you posted a meme on our Facebook page about watching it.
Yeah, and people stole my joke, but I guess that's just the internet. I was real upset about that.
Was that an original meme, or did you steal
that? Yeah, I legitimately, I watched it, and then I watched it again, took the screenshot, nailed the screenshot the first try, by the way. That was awesome. Didn't pause it or anything. That was just me watching it again. And then I posted that, and then I saw all of those pop up, like, later on in the day. I was like, you motherfuckers.
So is that the prism that you view life through right now anymore, is just, oh, I could make a meme of that?
Pretty much. I mean, I basically, I dream in memes now. Yeah, I frequent Reddit a lot. I am a subscriber to the meme template subreddit. So yes, I do have a life.
So what do you take
very interesting?
what do you take more seriously, your marriage or your meme making?
Both are super, super important. I would have to go with memes.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's the more important of the two for sure.
But the whole point of this isn't to talk about your shitty memes. It's to talk. No, I'm sorry. Don't take offense to that. Your memes are great. No, I want to talk about the Infinity War trailer, which was fucking amazing. Personally, like it, I think that it does a good job of being the culmination of how many years has it been? It'd be 10 years in 2018 leading up to this. When did Avengers come out? 2011. So it will have been 7 years since Thanos was first teased. So a lot of build up to this movie. And obviously a trailer can paint a beautiful picture for any movie, whether it's good or not, but I can't imagine that this movie's not going to be amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I thought it was actually kind of interesting because it's, for a teaser. Well, are they calling it a teaser or are they calling it like the first official trailer? Because I always think that's weird, that phrasing. Yeah.
It's over 2 minutes, so I'd imagine at that point it's the trailer.
Yeah, because it kind of started a little slow for me. Like it felt a little flat at the very beginning, but then once you get Thanos, I was like, all right, I'm game. I mean, it was an amazing trailer. Don't get me wrong. It's just like the first little bit was very trailery type of voiceover and just quick shots, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's whatever. And then it just kind of kicks in, and it's really awesome. Like the last half minute or so is really, really cool.
No, absolutely. Did you see that people online are comparing Thanos to Stone Cold Steve Austin?
I did see that. I also almost posted a meme earlier today. Somebody had taken Thanos and mixed him with Bruce Willis. And there was a Die Hard reference in there. I don't exactly remember the phrasing of the meme, and so I don't want to butcher it, but it was pretty funny. I almost posted it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, man. I obviously I think Thanos is going to be a great villain, and just seeing him throw Infinity Stones onto the gauntlet was amazing. But something doesn't look right about his head, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's
he's just not wearing his crown, his armor. I thought that was a weird choice.
Yeah, I put the armor on there because there's definitely a resemblance to Stone Cold without it. So,
yeah, it's pretty fantastic. It always amazes me. I mean, sometimes it's horrible, but a lot of times it's hilarious what the internet kind of clings to, and I just think it's funny.
So one thing with the trailer that it revealed is that in this movie, Spider-Man will be wearing the new suit that was teased at the end of Homecoming. And I don't know what your thoughts on it are. Like, I think that the suit is designed really well and it's a really cool looking suit, but so much was made in that movie about him making the decision to not take that suit and to keep being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like, I get it. Like, this is an apocalyptic situation, and
yeah, I think that's it right there.
He probably needs the armor, but I feel like it kind of belittles what happens at the end of that movie a little bit.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think you get to a certain point, and he kind of says it in Captain America Civil War. It's like he didn't want to play football because he couldn't before he had his power, so why should he now? Like, I think you get to a certain point where you feel responsible if something bad happens and you don't at least participate in stopping that bad thing from happening. So this is just like on a scale that we've never seen before with Thanos. So I think you have to jump into the fray at that point. And why not use this awesome suit that you have at your disposal?
The one thing whenever Age of Ultron came around and Vision was brought into creation and they put the Infinity Stone on his head, the first thing I thought of was, oh shit, that's gonna get ripped off his head. And
oh yeah, for sure.
In Infinity War, and I was not expecting to see that in the trailer. So I thought I was clever, maybe a little, but they just put it right out there in the trailer that I don't know if it'd kill him or what, but yeah, he's gonna get that shit ripped right off.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bold choice for them to just give it to Vision. Because, I mean, you knew Thanos was going to come along. You knew his story. You knew he was going to try to get all of the stones. So you knew eventually that was going to happen, or at least he was going to try to make that happen. So, but it is kind of shocking that they just put it out on Front Street on the very first trailer that they put out for this movie.
Yeah, and I thought that leaving the Guardians of the Galaxy as just like a brief tag at the end was a good creative choice as well, because there's been a lot of build up to them intermingling with people on Earth. So I hope that they hold off on showing us anything for the actual movie with them.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I thought they did a good job with this particular trailer, but I'm assuming that they're going to be front and center and at least some of the promo material, just because that's how things work. But yeah, I really like this. I like their little cameo. It felt more like a cameo in the particular trailer. But yeah, I'm super excited for everything that's going to happen. But I think at a certain point, when you have so many characters, like, people are bitching that certain characters aren't in this trailer, and I'm like, it's 2 minutes, and there's like a million fucking people in this movie, so you can't fit everybody into this trailer.
I don't know, man. I think pretty much everybody's in there except for Hawkeye.
Yeah, people were bitching about Hawkeye.
Poor Jeremy Renner, man. He has just not had a good go with this character.
No, not at all. But, I mean, the character kind of sucks, so.
Yeah, sure. All right, man. That is all I have for Nerd News.
All right, so our next segment, as it always is just kind of our main topic. It changes from episode to episode. We are going to review another movie this week, and the movie that we're going to review is the new Pixar film, Coco. It was released last week. It was directed by a duo of directors, as many Pixar films are. Our old friend Lee Unrich, who's been with Pixar since basically, I think, A Bug's Life, and then Adrian Molina, who has worked for Pixar for a while. I think he helped write A Good Dinosaur, which is not a great start, but yeah, he also co-directed this as well. And Coco follows Miguel, who, while following his dream of becoming a musician, gets trapped in the land of the dead. While there, he discovers a long-lost family secret. Why did you laugh?
Because it sounded like you said magician, which would be maybe a
musician.
A cool movie. I swear to God, you said magician.
Maybe I did, and I mean, you're gonna edit this, so you will find out. I'm pretty sure I said musician. It says musician on my note, but
yeah, I apologize for interrupting.
At no point is adding a magician to a movie gonna make it cooler.
sorry for throwing off your always great synopsises.
No, it's cool. So Tyler and I have talked about this a lot. We are huge fans of Pixar and the genre, so we don't really necessarily need to get into that. If you want to hear us gush over Pixar, we had a 2-part Pixar retrospective a way back, so definitely check that out if you haven't already listened to it. I don't want to speak for Tyler, but honestly, I feel like the company, as much as I love them, haven't truly made a great film in about 3 years, since Inside Out, really. Finding Dory was good, but not great, and Cars 3 was mediocre at best. So I was a little bit nervous, but going into this film, but I thought that the promo material was pretty good. The animation looked beautiful, as you would expect with a Pixar film, but what really kind of caught me with the promo material for Coco is the story seemed original. And for me, that's kind of Pixar in a nutshell, is the animation needs to look beautiful and the story needs to be original. And so I had my reservations, but I was pretty excited to finally see some more Pixar original content, not just a sequel again.
Yeah, and I'm definitely right there with you. I agree that there really hadn't been a great Pixar movie since Inside Out. And for me, like, I was excited because, like you said, this did look like it was a really original movie. But I think that I had been burned by their last 3 movies enough to where I wasn't just going to be excited for it because it was a Pixar movie.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of past that point at the, I mean, you know it, you're probably going to enjoy it because it's Pixar, but we're not just like running out to see it. Like, obviously we didn't review it last week when it came out because The Punisher was out. So, I mean, we were obviously not super excited for it.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I knew the whole time that I was going to see it, but there wasn't really much excitement whenever I walked into the theater. It was just kind of like, I got to do this because I love Disney and I love Pixar, and my wife wants to see it and we got to record it for the podcast. And nowhere in there was the thought of me wanting to see it because I thought it looked amazing. So I didn't have the highest expectations.
For sure. So with each of these reviews, we kind of just try to give a general overview before we kind of dive into the story and the performances and all that good stuff. We call that broad strokes. So how'd you feel about Coco?
So I'm really, really surprised by this movie and how much I loved it. So not only was it amazing from a charm factor and a storytelling aspect, but I thought it was such a great representation of a culture, and also it was a great representation of the tie that we have to our loved ones that have passed. I was very surprised by how much the story sucked me in and how invested I became in the characters and their journey throughout the movie. And for me, after all of this stuff I just said leading up to broad strokes about how Pixar's kind of fallen apart over the last couple of years with some of the movies they've put out, this was kind of a return to form, in my opinion. I was absolutely in love with this movie when I walked out of the theater.
So for those that listen to the podcast every week and is like, oh man, you guys always agree. Well, here's the exception. So around this time last year, I had some personal stuff that came up, and obviously I'm not going to get into it again. But I thought that because of that and some of the promo material, and as we were kind of getting closer to seeing this film, I thought that it was going to hit me on a real personal level, kind of similar to the gut punch that was watching Manchester by the Sea. Now, of course, I didn't expect it to be like unbelievably depressing like that film was, but I kind of felt like it was going to kind of hit me on a similar level, and it wasn't even close. I don't think I felt like I ever really connected with the characters. It was a really beautiful film, and it certainly has its moments, but I never really felt truly invested in the story.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah, I just, I never felt like we were watching a Pixar film. Like, I mean, the animation was beautiful and everything, like, but it didn't hit me like Inside Out hit me. Like, just didn't really blow me away.
Yeah, man, that's incredibly surprising. So I'm definitely eager to dig into this review and hear the issues you had.
All right, so you want to go ahead and start discussing the story? Yeah,
so for me, so it sounds like from your broad strokes, this is where it didn't really get your investment. But for me, this
Absolutely.
was the portion where Pixar returned to form. So we've talked about how the last three films, Cars 3, Finding Dory, and The Good Dinosaur, were disappointments, especially from a storytelling standpoint and an originality standpoint. I thought that this movie was on par with Inside Out for me. The story is truly compelling, and it had me intrigued and emotionally invested from start to finish. You feel for each character that they introduce and why they are of a certain mindset throughout the movie, and you can't help but feel connected to this family's pain and their triumphs. I thought that it was just completely original in its storytelling, and a movie about Dia de Muertos, that is also a musical. Like, I've just not seen anything ever like it. I think that there are definitely some plot elements that we've seen before in Disney movies, like the goofy animal sidekick, but overall, it's a hugely original story. I also love that I mentioned in my broad strokes that this concept shows Mexican folklore on display, like in a really respectful way. And I think that it truly embraces the culture and makes it feel authentic and magical throughout the whole movie. So that's where I stand with it. It really sucked me in, and maybe it's because I had lower expectations, but I absolutely left the theater feeling, I don't want to say like high or anything, but I definitely left the theater on like a really good note after watching it.
Yeah, so I feel like there's several different themes expressed in this film, but there was two really big ones that stood out to me. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is kind of the importance of following your dream and finding out what you truly want to do. And that's a really important message. I just feel like it's been done a million other times. And for Pixar, it just felt stale by their standards. And I think a lot of what I didn't like about this film, what has a lot to do with the fact that I expect maybe a little too much from them. So I just felt like that theme, well, it's an important message for kids to learn. I think at the same time, we've seen a million other animated movies do that same thing. And the other big theme that I gathered from this film was the importance of family. Another really important message. Family for me has become more and more important in the last year. Not that it wasn't before, but it just, because of things that have happened, it become more and more important. So I definitely think it's a great lesson for kids to learn, but there's been so many other films that have touched on that theme, and I just kind of expect more from Pixar because I don't know. I expect, and I keep making this comparison, but it's like, I was completely blown away by Inside Out, and I loved the theme of that movie, and I had never seen an animated movie do that before. Talk about the things that they talked about in that movie. And I kind of expected, because it's kind of dealing with a taboo issue of the dead and kind of appreciating that, and you don't see that too much in animation, so I don't know. I was just a little bit disappointed with the two major themes that I got from this movie. I will say that the twist towards the end of the film, as I won't, of course, spoil it, but I don't think it'll necessarily fool too many adults, but at its core, it's a kid's film. It's an animated film. So I think that you kind of have to grade on a curve a little bit, and I was kind of impressed given those standards. The kind of the third act, the twist that kind of begins the third act, I thought it worked really well. And also, that being said, the one thing that happened that did happen in the third act that did hit me on a personal level is when you kind of get that true version of Remember Me. I thought that was a really touching moment. So I did appreciate that quite a lot. I really loved the push recently by the animation genre to kind of try to start branching out and telling other cultures' stories. I really liked Moana. And honestly, I kind of hope that this film kind of grows on me like Moana did, because I don't know if you guys remember when we talked about this film. I think I mentioned it for what I was into last year. And I kind of mentioned that I wasn't that impressed with it, and it's definitely grown on me over the year, and I really appreciate that film a lot more than I did when I first saw it, so I'm kind of hoping Coco has the same effect on me. But I really like the push recently in the genre to tell other cultures' stories, and I don't know if they got the story right, because I'm literally and figuratively the whitest person you'll ever meet. So I don't know if they got the culture right, but I liked the fact that they went for it and they at least tried. Again, I also appreciate the fact that they were kind of fearless in making a film, an animated film about dead people. I mean, most of the characters in this film are dead, and that's not necessarily a topic that a lot of animation films and studios would take on. And so I definitely appreciate that. And that probably has a lot to do with the fact that it's Pixar and they can kind of take those chances for sure. But I definitely appreciate that. So there's things about this movie that I did really like. It just never hit me on that personal level that I expect with these films.
Yeah. And I mean, that's fair if it didn't hit you that way. I would say it hit me that way. The one thing you brought up that I didn't bring up in my story I want to touch on before we move on to performances is, like you said, the twist at the end of the movie. I saw that coming a mile away. And like you said, I think most adults would. But I talked to my wife after we got out of the movie and she did not see that twist coming a mile away. And that's when I realized that my wife has the mind of a child. So.
I'm glad that you said it because I mean we've made this joke a few times, but she's not the smartest.
No, I love my wife to death, and she's incredibly intelligent. She's just not great when it comes to movies, I don't think.
And honestly, like I've said this before, my wife's kind of the same way. Like when we watch like detective movies, I'm constantly trying to figure out who did it. I'm trying to figure out before the movie, and she just kind of watching the movie to see how it plays out. And honestly, I think that's probably the way you probably should watch the movies, but that's just not how my mind works. But the way that they planted everything, there's no way that it was going to be what they wanted you to think it was in the first two acts. Because
for sure.
I mean, you don't put that so out on Front Street so early in the movie if that's not going to be something that they're going to change at the end.
Oh yeah, they were definitely dropping not so subtle hints throughout the entire second act that gave it away.
For sure. All right, so moving on to the performances with animation. I mean, we're just talking about voice acting, and I appreciated with all of the whitewashing controversy that's been going around the last decade or so, I really appreciated that they made this film about Latin culture with a majority Latin cast. So I definitely appreciate that. Pixar has always cast their films really well. I will say that they took a chance on a relatively unknown child actor for the main role, and I thought he did a really, really good job as Miguel. And for the most part, nobody really stood out to me in the cast, but in animation, and we've discussed this before, that can be a good thing. Because if their voice doesn't take me out of the movie, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I don't really have much here because it's hard to pick out pieces in this movie in particular. I think that the entire cast did a really good job. I think that again, it's always hit or miss when you have a child actor, and I think that he did an amazing job as well. And it probably helps that it was a voice only part where they could get multiple takes pretty easily. And I also what I appreciated about this cast is whenever I was looking through it on IMDb is it seems like they used almost an entirely ethnic cast from what I can tell, which I think adds to the movie's authenticity quite a bit and just the culture, the feel of the culture that they were going for. So definitely no complaints from me as far as performances go.
For sure. So the last segment that we're going to talk about is, of course, animation. And we have said this probably a million times. We've reviewed a lot of animated films in the past. I mean, we're getting to the point where animation is just, it's just at an unbelievable level. And Pixar animation has always been great. And I think in the last decade or so, studios have slowly been able to kind of catch up on them. That being said, I think they really stepped up their game with this film. The colors and the detail really jump out at you. It's really, really amazing. I don't know if this is something that they showed at our theater exclusively or if it was something that just came with the film, but there was a clip before the film, kind of the creators talking about a particular scene in there, and I'm glad that they put that in there because when we were watching the film, it kind of I noticed a couple of things here and there because of that little clip, and it just made me appreciate it even more. Especially for me, what really stood out as far as the animation's concerned, is the bridge. Essentially the bridge to the dead, I thought was just beautifully done. The detail in it, the fact that like when anybody would step on it, it would light up, and it's basically these leaves that the living family members leave out becomes the bridge so the dead can cross over, and just the detail in the leaves and again, the lighting up and there's just the color around it, just really kind of jumps out at you. It's just, as much as Pixar has done an amazing job, I think this is probably their best work yet.
Yeah, and I think that every time we review an animated movie, as long as this podcast goes on, we'll probably have to put that little blurb in there about animation and about how the bar is consistently raised each time, because the technology is getting so great. But what's awesome about Pixar is they consistently are the ones to raise the bar. Even with mediocre movies like Cars 3 this year, there were definitely some beautiful moments in that movie. And this movie definitely takes it to the next step. I actually had in my notes as well that the Bridge of the Dead was particularly amazing. The animation that goes into that and how it was kind of like leaves, and each leaf had a texture. And I thought that was amazing. And then I also, in the theater I went to, had that little bit before the movie played about the animation and about how much detail went into building the City of the Dead. And I will admit that also made me appreciate the animation quite a bit more as the movie progressed. So I thought, again, the animation was fantastic. One other thing I'll call out with it before I wrap this up is the animating of people playing guitar. Just every chord that they hit was accurate as far as finger motions go, and I thought that was incredibly impressive.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's something that I don't think that a lot of people talk about, is just animating things is hard, especially at the level that Pixar does. But when you add the fact that there's also musicians in this movie, not magicians, musicians in this movie, it just has that added level of difficulty for sure.
Absolutely, man. So you ready to put a button on this with a review, or with a score rather?
Not quite yet. I wanted to real briefly, and we may have, should have talked about this at the beginning, but I thought it would be kind of fun to shit on the Frozen short that wasn't so short before this film. So Tyler and I kind of talked about this off recording, I think last week, but it was absolutely ridiculous how long that short was. I mean, I'm not a Frozen fan, so I'm certainly biased when it comes to this, but I just thought it was unbelievably, unbearably long.
Yeah, it was really bad, and I would say that I am a Frozen fan. I like that movie quite a bit, and I think that the music in that movie is pretty amazing, but that short pissed a lot of people off. It was almost a half hour long, and when you take a kid to see a movie like Coco, like, you're already going to have a hard time keeping their attention for that whole time, and it's an hour and 45-minute long movie. So you add a half hour onto that, plus the credits involved with that short, and you're looking at over 2 hours where you're asking a kid to sit still and pay attention, and that's a lot. And not only that, but it wasn't good either.
No, it wasn't at all.
So that was definitely a mistake. And I think that it was a ploy to get people to go see Coco, because obviously Frozen is a huge, huge thing. But I mean, we'll get to our score here in a second, but I think that Coco's definitely strong enough to stand on its own. And I miss the Pixar shorts that are typically in front of these movies that are usually really well made, and they are what's in the title. They're short.
Yeah, it was funny because they had been pimping this short for a while now, and the way that they had kind of described it in the shorts that they were kind of using as promo materials, it's like there was something that was happening, and we got about 10 minutes into this short and that thing hadn't even started yet. And I was like, wait a second, like what is happening here? And I literally looked at my phone as the movie was starting, and the showtime that we were at was a 9:15 showing, mostly because we were hoping that there wasn't going to be that many kids there, and there weren't. But, our movie wasn't starting until almost 10 o'clock, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. All right. So, why don't you go ahead and give a star rating for this?
So this is probably going to blow you away because it didn't hit or resonate with you like it hit and resonated with me, but I am giving this movie 4.5 stars.
Wow. Yeah. Man, I want to give it 3.5 just because you gave it 4.5, because I don't want to feel like I shit on it that much, but I'm going to stick with my guns and give it a 3.
Man, that's crazy. I think that might be the furthest that we've ever been apart on a review.
And like I said, I think it will probably have a similar track record as Moana did, where I felt pretty lukewarm on that film as well, and I've really grown to love that movie quite a lot. So, yeah, I hope that it kind of follows the same path as that movie did, but yeah, I don't know. I just didn't attach myself to it like I thought I was going to, and maybe that has a lot to do with it as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think whenever you're our age, if you can't attach yourself to an animated movie that you're watching, you're just not going to appreciate it, because at the end of the day, these movies are made for kids. So I understand.
For sure. All right, so what's nerd favorite this week?
Yeah, nerd favorite. So sticking with the animated theme, I thought that I would ask you a fairly simple question, and that is, what is your favorite voice performance of all time? And to give you a second to think of an answer, I'll go ahead with mine. And for me, it's a no-brainer, completely obvious. It's Robin Williams in Aladdin as the genie. That's always been my favorite voice performance. I love everything that he put into that movie. It's just, his performance is so hilarious, and it's so cool to hear stories about the recording of that voice and of that performance, just to hear how he improv'd so much, and they had so much dialogue from him, and some of it was adult and they couldn't use it because he just continuously riffed and put content out there to make the movie great. Also on top of him just being hilarious in it and being a highlight, I think that the songs that he sings in it are really great and really funny, and he brings a certain flair to it that is extremely charismatic. So Friend Like Me and Prince Ali are both two of the best songs on that soundtrack. So when I thought of this question, like, my answer was right at the front of my brain. It had to be Robin Williams and everything that he put into that movie, and it's especially touching now since he's not with us anymore, to go back and watch it and see how much he left there from a comedic standpoint.
Yeah, so behind the scenes a little bit as you were talking, not that I wasn't listening to you, but I just Googled like best voice performances just so make sure I didn't forget something, and literally the first one that popped up was best voice performances in animation since Aladdin, because they already just I mean, that's kind of a moratorium, like he's the best performance ever, so they might as well just go ahead and take that out of consideration. So absolutely, it's number one. It's not even close. No brainer. For me, I'm going to go with Will Arnett in the Lego Movie. I think his voice as Batman is just fantastic, and of course that movie is just phenomenal. I think he carries the same type of energy into the Lego Batman movie, even though I didn't like it quite as much as I liked the Lego movie just as a whole, not necessarily his performance, but he's just phenomenal as Batman. His energy for the character, especially a character that's been played so many times, I think is great. So I just love that so much.
Awesome, man.
All right. So that's it for episode 167 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. Of course, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio. Basically, any podcatcher you use, we're probably on it. Our website's thenerdpodcast.com. You can also comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Twitch channel. Also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google Plus. Email us at the nerds you're looking for, at gmail.com. And you can also vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are the nerds you're looking for. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys. Okay, 5,
4,
3,
2,
1.
blast off.